Demonstration for gluten-free cupcakes. So for this one is, again, I'm going to go through the same things. You're going to make sure that you've got your layout done in advance, obviously for writing your instructions, or you can just follow this video if you are doing it at home. So the equipment that you are going to need, firstly, you are going to need a large bowl. Obviously in school we will use plastic bowls, but I'm going to be using a glass one because I'm at home. Obviously, remember, the equipment might look different where you are compared to where I am, because everybody has different things in their home. So we've got our large bowl. We also need a cupcake tray with our cupcake cases ready. So there are 12 cupcakes that this recipe will make, okay? You will also need one jug. You will need one fork. Okay, so one fork. You will need a set of scales. Then you will literally be ready to start, as long as you have got your tablespoon measurement as well. Remember, if you haven't got any of the actual measuring spoons, you can use normal spoons, okay? So that is a tablespoon. Now, for this recipe, there is a range of ingredients, and I would like you to make sure that you're writing this down as we go through with the amounts, etc. So, first things first is we have got our large bowl. We're going to put it on our scales, making sure our scales are set to 0. Into those scales, we are going to be using gluten-free flour, because remember, these are gluten-free cupcakes. If you use normal flour, it will react slightly differently, but you can still change it to be normal cupcakes if you wanted to. So, our cupcakes, so we're going to be using flour and everything like that, okay? So remember, the main thing that is different is that flour, as I've stated already. Okay, so the first thing that you need to do is you need to measure into that bowl your sugar, okay? So we are going to be using caster sugar. The reason why we use caster sugar is because it's nice and fine. It means it's not going to make anything really gritty like your granulated sugar would. We're going to need 250 grams of sugar, okay? So it does seem like a lot, but obviously we are making 12 cupcakes. So 250 grams of sugar. Remember, if you go over, you choose your spoon to scoop it out until you get the exact measurements. Okay, so it's 250 grams of caster sugar. On top of that sugar, we are then going to measure exactly the same amount, but of butter. Okay. So remember, we need to get our measurements as precise as possible, because if we don't have them precise, it can affect how well the recipe works, okay? So we've got 250 grams of sugar, and we're going to follow behind with 250 grams of butter. Remember to turn your scales down to 0. If you can't turn them to 0, you just have to do a bit of maths and add those numbers together. So we need 250 grams of butter. So you can see here I'm using one of my spoons to help me measure these out, to make it a little bit easier, to help when it comes to precise measurements and things like this. Some people prefer to use other pieces of equipment, but the reason why I'm going to be using a spoon will make sense in a moment, because what we're going to have to do with our ingredients once they are measured. Okay, so 250 grams of butter. Again, it does seem like quite a lot because we are making quite a lot of cupcakes, okay? So you'll see how I'm using one of my fingers, or thumbs for me in this case, to help knock things off my spoon to help make it more precise, okay? So remember, we want our measurements equal, we want them to all be the same, otherwise the measurements can end up not being the same if we aren't careful, okay? So 250 grams of butter and sugar is in my bowl now. I will remove my bowl from my scales, put my scales to one side. With the butter and the sugar, we now need to do what is called a creaming method. You can use a whisk if you're going to be doing this electrically. Obviously in lessons we won't, so I'm going to show you how you would do this by hand. So basically what you would do, you would take your spoon and you will squish the butter to the sides. And this creaming method helps make that butter nice and smooth, and also squishes all that sugar into the butter. So you need to do this until all the sugar is all mixed in with the butter. It doesn't take very long, even if you're doing it by hand. Okay, so as you can see here, it's almost done. Okay. So once you've got all of that mixed together, we are then going to be going on to the next step of the recipe, which is our eggs. So you can see now that I've got all of my butter and my sugar mixed together. There is nothing at the bottom of my bowl, okay, just what looks like some nice creamy butter now, okay. So that butter is to be put to one side, ready for us to do our eggs now, okay. So in our jug with our fork, we're going to need to beat together 4 eggs, okay. So you need to make sure that you are being careful when you're doing this so we don't make loads of mess. Remember from year 8 with our food poisoning, if we get any eggs on the surface, we need to make sure that we clean that up straight away. Okay, so we're going to crack our eggs into the jug. So 1. Then we're going to take the second one. Oh, see there, I've just made a bit of a mess because my egg opened quicker than I thought. So that is why I've got some antibacterial wipes ready to help speed up any of the videos if this did happen. Okay, so remember, the reason why we need to make sure that we're keeping our surfaces clean is because we don't want to risk any food poisoning, okay? So obviously at the beginning you would have made sure all your equipment and your surfaces were clean before we started, okay? So making sure that everything is nice and clean before we continue, because obviously we did drop some of that egg, okay? So obviously accidents do happen. It is normal, even I do it, so don't worry if you do end up cracking a whole egg onto your worktop and things like that. If you're doing this at home and you get a bit stuck and you're not sure on how to move on, I'm pretty sure your parents should be able to help you with this. Okay, so that was my second egg, so I'm now going to do my third and my fourth, okay? So cracking the egg into the jug. That's 3. And last one, number 4, is going to be added on top. Okay. With these eggs, we're then going to take the fork. You should remember how to beat an egg from when we're in year 8. Okay, when we did those chicken goujons. Okay, but just in case you don't, remember you have to do it in half circles to help make it quicker. Have it at a bit of an angle and it helps you do it quickly. Okay, so you can see there that mine is nearly done. I've still got a couple of bits of stringy bits, so I just need to do it a little bit more. Okay, so that is my 4 eggs beaten together. So we're going to take our butter and sugar mixture and we're going to pour our egg on top. I don't pour it all in one go, so you can see I've still got some left in my jug. The reason for this is so that I don't spill any of my eggs. I'm mixing it into my butter sugar mixture. Okay, so stirring it together. Okay, added a bit more. So you can do this in 2 or 3 parts, that is fine, okay? And you need to make sure that you are being careful when you are stirring this so that you don't splash that egg everywhere, okay? Okay, last bit now. Tip all of the egg in, making sure that we're letting the last bits run out. Okay, and we're going to add that in as well, so that's all stirred together. You should be able to see in the video now, this has created what looks like a curdled mixture. So the reason for this is my butter and my eggs are at a slightly different temperature. This is okay because it gets fixed straight away. The main thing you need to make sure of is that you've got no big lumps of butter. Okay, so if you have, you just squish it at the sides like we did with the creaming method, and then that is now ready. So you put your jug to one side. We will need this in a moment, so don't get rid of it yet. Okay, so we've got our eggs, butter and sugar mixed together. So now what we're going to do, we're going to add in our flavouring and our dry ingredients. So obviously each person has a different choice on how they want to flavour their cupcakes, okay? So you can use vanilla essence, mint essence. Me personally, I thought I'd change it up a little bit, so I'm actually going to be using orange essence this time. So we're using our tablespoon measurement. We're going to measure in 1 tablespoon of your chosen flavouring. Add it in. Make sure we're getting all of that off that spoon. Okay, and we're going to stir that in. Make sure that all of that gets mixed in well. The reason as well why I've used the orange essence is so that you can see how I've made sure that everything is mixed in. Obviously, if you use a flavouring that has no colour, it is a little bit more difficult to check that you have stirred it in fully. Okay, so we're going to stir that all in, making sure that every little last bit is stirred in properly. And that is now ready for our dry ingredients. So with this next bit of the recipe, you need to make sure that you are using clean, dry equipment to help with this. So obviously, I've just used my tablespoon, so I'm just giving it a quick wash. Okay, so I'm making sure that there's no flavourings left. I'm going to make sure it's completely dry. The reason for this is because if I put this spoon into dry ingredients and I have had this in wet ingredients, the dry ingredients will end up sticking to that spoon. Okay, and we don't want that to happen. Okay, so we're going to make sure now we are going to add in our cocoa powder. Okay, so for the cocoa powder, I would like you to have 3 tablespoons. Remember, we need to have flat tablespoons so they are level and equal measurements to make sure that we are being precise. Okay, so that's 2. And last one, number 3, added in. Okay, so you can see there how I've popped it all on the top. Last ingredient, but definitely not least, because it is one of the most important ones, is our flour. So for this, we need to bring our scales back. Okay, we're going to put our bowl back on the top and set it to 0. And we're going to add in the same amount of butter, sugar, and flour in total. So it's 250 grams of flour that we are going to be adding in now. Okay, so remember, if you go over, you're just going to pull a little bit out. Okay, so 250 grams of flour. Okay, so remember, it is looking like it's going to be quite a lot, but it makes quite a lot of cupcakes. Okay, so 250 grams of flour put on the top. Again, you will see I've removed my scales, so I've got a flat surface. That means it is easier for me to work. This next step of the recipe, it is important that you stir slowly. So if you stir too quickly, all of that dry ingredients is going to go poof and out of the way. Okay, so we're going to stir this in nice and slowly. You will see how I'm actually folding it in. I'm not stirring per se. Okay, if you do want to stir, that is fine, but it's not going to do much. You're literally just rotating it. Okay, so if you fold it, you're helping push that dry ingredients down. So you can see that combined in quite quickly now. Okay, need to make sure we're scraping around the edges, making sure we scrape across the bottom. You need to make sure that everything is completely mixed together. We don't want any of these ingredients not combined together properly. Okay, so you can see this mixture is starting to get nice and thick now. Okay, give it a bit of a tap on the sides, making sure that you're getting it mixed properly. Okay, scraping along the bottom to make sure that you've got no loose flour that you've not stirred in. Scraping at the sides, turning the bowl as needed. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm scraping across the bottom to check that I've got no flour, butter or sugar mixtures or anything like that stuck on its own where it isn't combined together. So that is now done. So that is my cupcake mixture, all nicely made, ready. Now, you should remember earlier I said do not get rid of your jug yet. There is a reason. The reason why we have that jug to one side is it helps make it much easier to now put our cupcake mixture into our trays, okay? So what you do is you take your jug and your mixture, and you are literally just going to pour that mixture into your jug. Okay, so as you can see here, obviously depending on the size of jug you've got, depends on if you'll be able to pour in all of that mixture at once into the jug or not. Okay, so obviously I've got quite a large jug, so mine is a litre jug, so I can actually fit all of this in once. Okay, if you've got a smaller jug, you will have to do it in parts. That is fine. Okay, a lot of people leave it at that when scraping the bowl. I would advise trying to get as much out of there as possible because we don't want to waste any of our ingredients, okay? So we're stirring it all together. making sure that we've got all of that ingredients in our jug. Okay. Obviously, because this jug was used for egg at the beginning, is you do need to make sure that you've not got a bit of egg residue around the outside on its own. Because obviously you're not going to want one cupcake swimming in a little bit of cooked egg. Okay, so you will see I'm using my fingers to make sure I'm scraping it all off that spoon, so I'm not wasting any of it. Okay. I then use the fork that I used for the egg originally to stir this all together, making sure that everything is all combined in that jug ready. Okay, obviously if you've got anything on your hands, you will have to clean your hands again, because obviously we don't want to risk any mess or food poisoning. Okay, so the reason why we put it into the jug, it is much quicker and easier to pour into those cupcake cases if we don't have to use spoons, okay? Because the jug, at the end of the day, the use of it is to measure and to pour. So we might as well use pieces of equipment for what they are meant for. So you can see here what I'm doing is I'm literally pouring, using my fork to help guide my mixture into my cupcakes, okay? And then I use my fork to stop the pouring as I tilt my jug, okay? So to start with, I would fill each of your cupcakes to halfway, because remember we've got self-raising flour in here, which means it will rise. Basically, it's plain flour with a bit of baking powder in. Okay, so we're going to put these in here. We don't want to overfill them, okay, because we don't want them overflowing. If you get any of the mixture on your actual baking tray, so the cupcake case tray, we need to make sure that we clean that up, because it's very difficult to clean it after you put it in the oven. Okay, so we need to make sure that we are filling all of the cupcakes like this, making sure that we are using as much of our mixture as possible. Okay, depending on the sizes of your cupcakes and cases and things like that, depends on how many you will actually make. So you will make at least 12, but sometimes you will actually make a little bit extra. Okay, like for example, as I know, my cupcake cases are quite small in comparison to the ones we use at school. Okay, so we will need to possibly do some extra ones at the end for me. Okay, so you will see how I'm then going back to the ones at the beginning to try and make these all as even as possible, because we don't want them cooking at uneven times. Okay, so we're going to make sure all of this is all together. The oven temperature that these need to go in at is 180, same as everything else that we do. 180 is normally around gas mark 4 or 5, depending on your oven. Okay, so you can see here is I've still got some mixture left over because my cases were a little bit small. But I don't want to fill them much more, because otherwise they will overflow as they cook. Okay, so we need to make sure that we are putting these all nicely together. I'm making sure that each of them are a similar size as possible, so we don't get one that's completely cooked, one that's raw, or one that's burnt. Okay, we want them to all finish at the same time. Okay, so the way to check these if they are cooked is you would take a normal knife when you think they are done. You would stab through the actual cupcake. If it comes out looking like it's got some the actual cake mixture on it, like you would with cookies as well, then that means it is not done. Okay, if it's got a tiny bit on it and it's more like just water, that means it is done, okay, because you will have a bit of condensation on them when you remove them from the oven. These need to be in the oven for 20 minutes or until the item you use to skewer it into them, whether it be a skewer, a knife, a fork, if that comes out clean, it is done. So it can take 15 minutes, it can take 20 minutes. It depends on the size of your actual cupcake cases, okay? So let's make sure we get those into the oven, getting them cooked, getting them sorted so that they are ready for us to eat or decorate afterwards. Okay, make sure that you've got your instructions completed to the standard that I expect, like I have set for you on Firefly. If you need to rewind this video, feel free to watch it through as many times as you need to until you get this done. Okay guys, well done on getting everything done so far. Make sure that you are submitting any work if you're watching this video for your lessons.